Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of One Missing, One Murdered, All Indigenous, which is a true crime podcast dedicated to true crime involving Indigenous people. Now, I'm your host, Jordan Lombert, and I want to start off the top of the show by saying thank you to everybody for downloading the episodes through Podbean and checking us out on our YouTube page, as well as those of you that have subscribed to the Facebook page. It means so much to me that you guys are checking this out. Please don't forget to share it. Spread the word, and if you like what you hear, don't forget to share, subscribe, and I promise you there's going to be more to come in the future. Now that we got that out of the way, we're going to kick the show off. I know last week that we started talking about how we were going to do two cases each episode, one missing case, one murder case, but today we're going to do something just a little different in that I think that this case, in and of itself, by itself, checks almost all the boxes. I mean, It's a compelling story and a very heartbreaking story as well. And I think that you all will definitely want to hear what this case has to offer. As well as we have a couple of bonus interviews from family members of this case. And later on in the show, we'll get to hear exactly what they thought and share their insights as to what was going on during that time. But before we get to all of that, let's start off the show by talking about the disappearance of Regina Marie Curtis. Now, in 2000, Regina Curtis was a 16-year-old Indigenous girl who actually lived in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Now, she grew up in the Clinton area, and she was actually described by her family and friends as loving to listen to music, hanging out with her friends, spending time with her family, especially her nieces and her nephews. Now, she loved to entertain, and nothing made her happier than getting other people to smile and laugh around her. Now, she was a freshman in high school at the time. Now, according to reports on May 12th of 2000, Regina was reported as a missing runaway juvenile from southwest Oklahoma City. Now, from the first missing report, the family would spend the next decade and a half searching and wondering just what happened to their beloved Regina. And it wouldn't be until February 3rd of 2016 that the family would actually receive some answers regarding Regina. Now, nearly 16 full years later, her family was notified that Regina's remains were found, get this, all the way back in June of 2000. Now, that's less than a month after she originally went missing. Now, I want to put a disclaimer out right now that we will be talking about some gruesome and very detailed elements of a case. So, viewer discretion, not viewer, but listener discretion is advised from this point forward. Now, according to a report, Regina's remains were actually found on June 22nd of 2000, which, like I said, is a little over a month after she was reported missing. And they were found near Lake Draper, which is about southwest of Oklahoma City. Now, according to the Doe Network.org, a man mowing his yard came across the skull of what looked like a child. Now, the skeletal remains were found scattered across 25 acres, and some of them never even being recovered. The remains were categorized by that of a female between the ages of 13 and 17, of mixed descent, possibly Caucasian and Native, or Caucasian and Hispanic. There was no specified height, but having a petite frame. The remains had brown curly hair, which was about shoulder length. The dental age of that remains was about 13 to a 16-year-old. The clothing that was found was a white sleeveless t-shirt or tank top, Wrangler blue denim carpenter-type jeans with the cuffs rolled up twice, and a gray or white sports bra, along with crew-length socks. Unfortunately, there were no shoes or underwear to be found with the remains. Now, of those remains, the bones that were found were a skull, a mandible with partial natural dentation, and many acutely open sockets, 8 thoracic vertebrae, a right and left clavicle, 7 right ribs, 10 left ribs, right and left scapula, and 15 pieces and fragments of various long bones. Now, I kind of want to linger here for a little bit that the remains that were found were by a pretty large lake there in Oklahoma. So, I mean, speculate as you will as to how these bones were scattered across a 25-acre radius and just, how they got there. Now, the Oklahoma City Police have released a timeline of events in Regina's case. So let's go date by date and kind of explain what was significant on these days, and we'll kind of break them down a little bit. Now, of course, like I said, on May 12th of 2000, Regina was reported as a runaway juvenile in southwest Oklahoma City. Again, this is all according to the Oklahoma City Police Now, in June 22nd of that same year, in 2000, found remains were reported at Lake Draper in far southeast Oklahoma City. Now, if you remember, Regina actually was in the southwest of Oklahoma City when she went missing. In November of 2000, there was a composite clay model sent to media outlets and the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation and attempted to distribute them through the school systems. Now, I've had a chance, and I'll share these pictures online. These pictures are if you look at the pictures, there's a lot of similarities with these clay models and a picture of Regina. Now, in October of 2002, nearly 2 years later, they reattempted to disseminate composite clay models to the news media. Following 2 months after that same year, they also tried to spread composites clay model flyers sent out to schools. They were sending them out to make sure that everybody could kind of get an idea of they're really trying to identify who this is. And in that same month, the first sample of remains was submitted to the University of North Texas for DNA analysis. Now, there's about a good a good 2 year difference, 2 years and a month gap in between December 2002 and January 2005, when a second sample of remains was submitted to the same University of North Texas, because the first sample did not contain sufficient bone marrow for any analysis. Now, in August of 2006, DNA was obtained by the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation from the Curtis family and was sent to the same University of North Texas for a DNA profile. Following 4 years after that, in March 2010, a composite drawing was released to the media, and following that, the Oklahoma City Police Department received various tips from the Curtis family, believing that the remains may be Regina. Now, they had also believed that the remains were her, but there was no DNA evidence to make that confirmation. And finally, in January of 2016, a DNA match was made by the University of North Texas, positively identifying the victim, following which they notified the Oklahoma City Police Department. And on February 3rd of 2016, the OCPD sent out a next of kin notification to the Curtis family referencing the DNA results. So they confirmed that was her. Over the 16-year-long journey, nearly 16-year-long journey, that's how long it took. That's how long it took for these specialists to analyze and identify that these remains that they had found 1 month prior to her disappearance was Regina this entire time. Now, throughout the years, Regina's family never gave up, and they even spoke with the local news in Oklahoma, which is News Channel 4, multiple times. Her brother Virgil Curtis actually said in an interview that it's a strain that we all carry. It's just there and we live with it every day. Now, according to the same article, the Curtis family actually worked with the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation to see if remains that were found in the area of the state could possibly be Regina. But unfortunately, in both times, the DNA was not a match. Later on in that same interview, Virgil said that, quote, "just knowing what happened to her will put some kind of rest to her." Now, the police believe that it's likely because there were numerous other missing person reports at the same time as Regina that it may have contributed to not connecting the two cases right away. Now, one of the things that I came across in my research was an old news article that was broadcasted sometime in 2000 when they had actually discovered the remains. It was broadcasted by KOCO News 5 ABC, and they're talking about finding these remains, who it could be, and they're describing everything. And as they're talking about it, they're talking about who it could, like I said, they're talking about who it could be. And they named about 3 individuals that were missing at the time. But surprisingly, Regina's name was not one of them. Now, granted, these cases had been open for about 3 years. Still, it's a little alarming that Regina was not one of the girls that had been named in this news article connecting her. But, I mean, that's neither here nor there. Now, there is an investigation at the moment being launched into exactly why it took so long to identify Regina's remains. And the Oklahoma Medical Examiner's Office released a statement regarding the case. Quote, "Over many years, the OCME has archived around 150 unidentified skeletal remains in our evidence vault. Some of these descendants have been with us for decades, prior to DNA testing or searchable national database for missing persons. Prior to 2012, the OCME had no dedicated in-house personnel systematic method, or tools to allocate specifically toward making positive identifications in these cases. And in 2012, we hired a full-time forensic anthropologist, Angela Berg, and in 2015, we hired a second one, Dr. Carlos Zambrano. Together, in a relatively short amount of time, they have been able to register 113 of these human remains in a searchable national database, or NamUs, and have assisted directly in the resolution of 61 missing person cases, some dating back as far as 1968. Regina Curtis, whose remains were found in 2000, was one of these people identified in their tireless efforts, in conjunction with the national database, law enforcement, and DNA testing provided by UNT-HSC in Texas. Now, Regina was finally brought home, and she was laid to rest on February 13th of 2016. She was actually buried in the Cantonmont Cemetery in Canton City, Oklahoma. Investigators in Regina's case are looking into just how she might have died and now have reclassified it as an open homicide case. Now, at the time of this recording, the police investigators have not named any suspects, nor is there any public information regarding this investigation. Now, if you have any information regarding this case, I urge you to please contact the Oklahoma City Police Department, which is 405-297-1000. Again, that number is 405-297-1000. Like I said at the top of the hour, we've actually gotten a very rare opportunity to talk to not one but two people from Regina's family to really talk about what was going on in that time and kind of answer some questions that, that I had at the time, and I think that you guys will really enjoy. I want to preface these recordings were very hard to hear and understand because the phone connection was so shabby, I guess it would be the word. But I mean, I did my best to try to get through as best I could. And the first interview that we're going to be talking to is Regina's aunt, who her name is actually Sammy Curtis. And she goes inside and really gives us another window of what was going on and kind of gives us a lot more detail than I could find out through any of these news articles and all my research. Now, the second interview that we're going to be doing will be talking to Sammy's son, Shannon Curtis. And he has a lot more insight and a lot of things that I didn't expect to hear. But without really burying the lead, let's get right into this first interview with Sammy Curtis. I hope you guys all enjoy this. So we're sitting down talking to Regina's aunt. I guess I don't want to bury the lead. Can you kind of tell us what was going on around that time?
Well, from what I know is that she had walked down to the corner store and to use the payphone, and she just never returned.
How soon after that did the family realize that she was missing?
Well, later on that same day. I mean, it's been like hours and then more hours, and it just until they decided to, report it. Mm-hmm. And it was within the same day.
Now, did they file a police report, a missing persons case?
Yes.
Now, a lot of the times when we go through our missing person cases is when they're originally going through and going to file the missing persons thing, did they tell them that? Because I'm assuming because Regina was under the age of 18, were they right on top of it?
Well, no, not really. They were saying that she might be a runaway, and that they would have to, give her some time before they really investigate it.
Now, that's something that I did run across in my research, is that she was listed as a runaway. So, I mean, that kind of answers that question right there.
Right. Yeah. I'm not sure how long she was listed as a runaway before they actually start investigating.
Now, did they, in all my research that I found, like, there was nobody there was no description as to what she was wearing or anything like that. So, I mean, I'm kind of curious as to, like you said, she went down to the corner store, and that's been the big thing, is that there's so little about this case that is out there that, I mean, it's like I said, this is why I'm really hoping, you you guys can help kind of fill in that little gaps of what was going on after that. Like, so what happened after, right after all of that started? Like, how long was the family looking?
Oh, continuously, all the time. We looked everywhere, all the time. We would get stories that someone seen her here or there, and when we would check into it, that nothing would turn. I mean,
yeah, that's kind of like I said. That's been a lot of. There's not a lot known about whether people might have seen her or if they seen her anytime after this, before this. I mean, like you said, the last place that the family seen her was walking to the corner to the store. I mean, and that's even new to me. So right after this, I mean, you guys are looking and looking. Is when they did find the remains. Was anybody notified around that time that there was a body that was found?
No, we just watched the news and seen what was on the news, and well, before that they had done the TV interviews and the news articles and even the sketches. We wasn't for sure if it was her, but we, called it and checked on it anyway. And they said they didn't have enough, DNA to make a positive ID. So finally, in May of 2000, 16 years later, it's when they called and said that they had positive ID.
From my notes, it was in 2016. So 16 years later.
16, yeah.
Yeah, yes. I mean,
she went missing in 2000, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, 16 years later, your guys are, was there any hope that she still might be out there? I mean, yeah. Obviously, yeah. I'd imagine that you guys are still hoping that to find her out there. But I mean, to get word 16 years after that, that's where she was the whole time. I mean, I can only imagine how frustrating that was.
Yeah, we had hope till the very end that she was still out there.
It's just so crazy that this case has gone on this long. I mean, have you guys gotten any answers about why it took so long?
No, not really.
It confuses me so much that this case. I mean, even in my research, I mean, I only have here and there research, but I mean, it's really hard because right as soon as they find out that that was her 16 years later, I mean, how much evidence really is left from that point forward? I mean they've classified it as a homicide since then, so I mean, where does the case stand today?
I'm thinking that they're still looking into it because they didn't come up with anything that was positive on, what actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
How she was, I would say, murdered.
Well, I mean, like I said, they have classified it as a homicide, so I mean, obviously, the authorities suspect foul play, so.
But, yeah, nothing's ever come up other than what's on the news. Her dad has passed away since like 3 years ago.
I'm so sorry to hear that. Like I said, this has been a whirlwind roller coaster. I can only imagine for you guys, for you as a family, and like you said.
Yeah, we still wonder about everything and what happened because we still don't know. All we know is they identified her and we brought her home and buried her, and we still wonder about what happened with her.
I want to go back a little bit. They started releasing these clay models right after they had found the remains, and I mean, there are several pictures out there that they've released in the time since they found them. I mean,
Hmm.
did you guys ever look at those clay models and have any feeling that that might have been Regina?
Yeah, and when we did, we would call it in, and there was still no kind of investigation, but they would, come back and say, well, no, this wasn't her, or we found, they found who the remains belonged to, and
In December of 2002, they had collected DNA and they first sent it off. But from my research, that it wasn't enough, and 4 years later, they had actually taken DNA from the family. So I mean, somewhere in between there, they had to have had some kind of. I thought that maybe she, maybe that was her. I mean, when they took family or when they took DNA from the family, did they was there kind of any indication that hey, we might have her or
well, I would think so because I mean that seems like that's why they would do that. They might have thought the
mm-hmm.
same thing, that maybe it could have been. I mean, it looked similar.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, I've looked at these photos and I've looked at these clay models. I mean, it's a very close comparison, and
Yeah, it is.
it's like if you're making this much noise, but why is why? I mean, you guys have got to be driving yourselves crazy, thinking like, why aren't they doing something, or it sounds to me like you guys
Yeah,
were
it
having to be
is.
the one that initiated it.
Mhm. Yeah, we did. We called it in. Then they told us they would come out and do an interview, do the DNA test, and take samples, which I know of that they did that twice with my brother,
Mm-hmm.
her dad, and then it would go a long time before we would hear anything else. I mean, until maybe we've seen another picture on the news, a portrait of someone that looked like her again. It just went on until, they finally did come up with Regina, her remains.
Were you there when they did? I mean, were you there when they confirmed that was Regina?
I was the one that they called to talk to Virgil, and I gave them his information,
Mm-hmm.
phone number, and stuff, and he talked to them from there.
Mm. One of the things that I found in my research when I was looking through news, trying to find news articles, videos on YouTube, stuff like that. One of the things that I did find was they ran a story of finding the remains, of finding Regina's remains. But one of the things that really struck me as odd was that they did name three young girls that were missing at the time, but Regina wasn't one of them. Does that kind of strike you as odd?
Oh, yeah. I don't know if it was at the time. They kept it on the shelf or wherever for that long,
Mm-hmm.
16 years. Because they said she was found like a month after she
Mm-hmm.
disappeared. And for them, to be doing DNA testing with the family and then having her remains there and not, letting us know that it could have been,
Mm-hmm.
and doing whatever we needed to get further information to them.
I'm looking right here at the timeline that's been put out there. Regina actually went missing on May 12th of 2000, and the remains were actually her remains were actually found on the 22nd of June of that same year. So, little over a month, they found her, and
Mhm.
I mean, and the first sample that was pulled, was pulled from the family was in 2006. So I mean, 6 years, and they finally pieced it together that this may be the same person.
Mhm.
But
I don't know why it took so long though. I mean,
Like I said, I really, it's racked my brain for so long. I mean, I've been sitting here looking at this case up and down, and it's just, I guess one of the questions that I have to ask is, do you feel as though that Regina's case was handled so poorly because she was Indigenous? Do you think that that might have contributed to the kind of fumbling? Is the only word that I can come up with that would best describe this.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, that's how I feel about it. I mean, I think that because she was Indian, that they didn't, really look into it like they would have if she wasn't. They took their time about it. They weren't really interested. I mean, put it on the back burner, like.
I have a very good friend of mine. She's actually knows Virgil. Her name is Janet Franson. She runs the Lost and Missing in Indian Country, and her and I have talked extensively throughout our conversations, talking about missing person cases, and kind of what's contributing to a lot of this. And I've talked about it on the show a lot, and my listeners will know that it's what she referred to as hot potato. And when it comes to these missing cases too, as well, like, it's not considered police work, is how it was kind of framed. And I really think that she's right on the money with that. And as I'm doing a lot of these research, it's really hard to ignore that these cases that we're talking about are handled so poorly, and it's really hard not to contribute, not to link the similarities that they are Indigenous women, they are Indigenous men and children, and it's getting harder and harder to deny that there's a pattern here. As much as we try to look at both sides, I mean, this is definitely a case that just screams out and makes you itch your head as to why in the world did they wait this long, and like I said, the timeline even has huge gaps in it, has years of gaps in trying to figure out these remains. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, I feel like it could have been handled a lot better. I mean, that it wasn't handled properly.
Well, now that you guys have, I mean, you guys bring her home in 2016. You guys finally have some closure as to what happened after that. I mean, where does it go from? I guess we've kind of already answered that. Where did you guys go after you guys had laid Regina to rest?
Well, we just keep looking for answers. I mean, somebody out there knows something. What happened to her? I mean, yeah, we got closure in bringing her home, but not closure in what happened to her.
Mm-hmm. Well, some of the things that I hope to really get from talking to the family members is, and it's what I started out with this podcast, and it's that so often we find ourselves looking at these missing cases or these cases involving homicide, and I mean, not just outsiders, not just non-Indigenous people, but just even as an Indigenous man, I look at these cases, look at these pictures, and I wondered to myself, who was Regina? What did she like to do? What didn't she like? I mean, what was her goals, aspirations? I mean, she's 16. That's right on the, that's a couple years shy of 18, right before graduation. I mean, just cut off way too soon. I mean, and one of the things that I hoped that would come from all of this is reminding people, like I said, that she was a person. Would you guys like to share some of your favorite stories of Regina?
Sure.
So I want to take a second to kind of explain what's going on here. I had originally called to speak to Regina's brother, Virgil. And when I did get a hold of him, I was told that his aunt, Sammy, was going to be answering questions and kind of telling her side of the story, which I really enjoyed. Like I said, Sammy was able to give us a lot of information that wasn't really known and kind of helped illustrate kind of the older perspective as to what was going on around that time. And as I was conversing with Sammy, I found myself on the phone with another individual, and his name was Shannon. Now, Shannon is actually Sammy's son, which would make him Regina's cousin or first cousin. So, but we'll get into that in the interview. But like I said, I do want to apologize. The signal on these phone calls was really hard on both ends. So there's times when you probably aren't going to be able to understand as much. But it was a really great interview, and I really hope that you guys enjoy hearing another story and another perspective about Regina's case. So without further ado, let's get to it.
Hello? I'm one of her first cousins. My name's Shannon.
Shannon? Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I was just asking some questions about what it was like during that time of, kind of just giving the point of view of what was going on, like during Regina's initial disappearance, and then all of that stuff is what I was calling to talk about.
I wasn't there the entire time, but we're a close family.
Mm-hmm.
They live 87 miles away or so to the east. We journey back and forth to see each other, all the time. Holidays, birthdays, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was normal until so she didn't go use the phone. It was about evening time, dusk, about to get dark. But the store was just right across the field. You could see it over there, There was a bunch of us all out there in the parking lot talking. I thought she said something about going to go talk to one of her boyfriend, or talk to her boyfriend. And, I'm just right over here. I'm going to use the payphone. I'll be right back. And we was about to come back to Clinton, Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
It was me and my grandmother and my sister and some of our cousins that stayed with us here in Clinton. Try to wait on her to, come back or whatever. Wind up staying an hour or so longer, 45 minutes or an hour. She never made it back. We was like, oh, well, we'll catch up with her next time. Maybe he came and picked her up or whatever.
So,
and they called us. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, so were you one of the last people of her in her family to actually see her?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, just like walk away. I don't know what happened to her, what anything else. Just seen her going through that field and kind of lost sight of her. She got closer to the store.
How old were you when this all happened?
Oh goodness, how old was I? It was 20 years old.
You were 20 years old. Wow. Yeah, because she went missing in 2000, May of 2000. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So.
Yeah, 20.
Now,
turned 20 basically.
Now, when she first went missing, I mean, did you guys go out and look for her on your own, or did you guys go to the police first, or?
Well, like I was saying, whenever we came on back home to Clinton, they called us the next day and was like, she still hasn't made it.
Mm-hmm.
And we threw up all kind of hypotheticals, well, maybe she's, I don't know, maybe got a hickey or something. She don't want to be caught. She don't want to be seen, something to that effect. And then, as time goes by, everybody panics, and I don't like to think like that first, but unfortunately that's what I felt. That's what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't want it to be true or anything, but I mean, get a society in, it's a little bit more crazier than it was, or than it is now, than it was back in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
So in the neighborhood they lived in wasn't all that, it was a project. So
mm-hmm.
numerous walks of lives go through there. I mean, not judging nobody saying they're good or bad or anything else. It's just we become products of our society.
Right.
Yeah, it was put up. When we heard that, we went back up there to be with them. Like maybe day 2 or and visit around with them again, waited again all day with them, call friends, other family members and whatnot, trying to get a location on her. To no avail. So we started calling like news stations, radio stations, anybody, everybody, putting up flyers, going to the stores, talking to anybody we could, showing them pictures.
So you guys did a lot of the
information.
You guys did a lot of the groundwork first, huh?
Yeah, I mean, they were called, the cops were called or whatever, but they said they couldn't do anything for 72 hours or something like that, even though she was a minor.
Wow. That's one of the things that on this show, and as my listeners already know, that 24-hour rule, or when it comes to missing cases, we keep running into this wall of police saying that, oh, we have to wait 24 hours, or 48. And like you said, in 72, like you said, nowadays, it's a lot different because, because she's a minor, right out of the gate, boom, police are usually right on top of it. But this is obviously 2 decades past. I mean, still, like you said, a minor.
Yeah, well, a minority minor.
Yeah.
Okay. And what was really taking my strings was, after everything was taken care of, they had located her remains 2 weeks after the incident took place. And we didn't hear nothing for 2 years.
Yeah, she went missing. She was reported missing. From the timeline that I've got in my research, she actually went missing on the 12th of May, and the remains were found at Lake Draper, which is, I guess, southeast of where she went missing, June 22nd of 2000. So a little over a month, they had found these remains. But one of the things that I was talking to your mom about was that around this time, I going through all of this and trying to piece this timeline together has been like one of the most challenging parts about all this. But I did come across something interesting, which was a KOCO News Channel 5 report. Mm-hmm. When they did find these remains, they did put it up there. But the weirdest thing that hit me was that Regina's name was not one of the... They said that there were 3 other cases missing, or of missing girls in the area, and Regina's name wasn't one of them. So, I mean, that kind of hit me weird too.
We had that little side of information as well, but to believe, where to go to next, and you hear things you don't want to believe. Mm-hmm. Whenever we heard that, we don't want anything like that. We want to put that farthest from our mind.
Right. But you
want just to get any kind of information, we did follow up on it, and they said, well, there's no guarantee, because of where she was found, the location, there's little discrepancies in that. How could she make it that far? We don't know those things. Mm-hmm. But, we was asking everybody, and Channel 5, like you said, wouldn't release the names, or wouldn't, so they was basically telling us it could be anybody. We gotta do DNA and everything else like that. We need to get hold of some family members. Hell, me and her brother, they weren't related to her. It was ready to do DNA swabs or whatever needed to be done. But it's just a 72 hours. That's a hell of a window that, and then you just wait on results, test results and stuff like that. As long as 72 hours. And everything takes its toll on time and patience. And
I feel like
we get frustrated from lead to lead. She wanted to say the same thing over and over and over and over. And I don't give a damn how many times I tell the story. None of it's going to change because it's the truth.
I feel like within that first 24-hour window, I mean, you see a lot when it comes to these missing people cases. The first 24 hours, especially when it involves a minor, would you agree that that's
critical?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, I do. And I was thinking that they would change some laws. They got all these like Amber Alerts and stuff, out now. But if we would have better communication, better resources, and honestly, we could have walked with her to the store or something, or simple things, little things. Not to blame anybody, but just, you have these departments, justice or whatever. What do? They sit around and gather information until they can piece it all together. They don't act on it. They get a piece of it and sit around and wait for another piece to come. And I'm sure that's not how it is, but that's just the way I felt during this one, because time was not on our side, and I guess neither was criminals at large.
I was
going to our sister.
No, obviously, they find her remains less than a month later. I mean, this timeline that I have here, I mean, there's huge substantial gaps in between here. I mean, in I mean, from the late 2000, I mean, they started making these clay composites. I mean, did you guys see these, and did it kind of set off like, hey, that's Regina?
Any case, anything we ever heard, yeah, we checked on. Just even if it was race, didn't matter. It was a case that led us to that. So I don't know how to word this right. It's all like due process, you know.
But I mean, still, you guys are still ringing a bell. You guys are still constantly checking in, making sure, touching base with the police, and what is their reaction to all of this?
It's kind of like, like it's been going on for so long. We don't have, what you want to hear. We don't have the things, that you want us to tell you. They're like, well, can you give us information on, where or, how it was? No, we can't release any information until, we know it's your sister. And so trying to exhaust yourself on every little thing, thinking, hoping, and then you get there and they shut the door in your face.
Wow, so you guys were, like you said, you guys were really following up. I can only imagine how frustrating that is.
Because we called, and whenever we start getting shut up by them, my brother, he started calling Channel 9, Channel 4, he started calling all these channels, Fox. And they was going over to his apartment, doing interviews with him. Like 2 years or a year later or so, it's like, we have Virgo here, and still looking for his sister, and did the whole report. And I don't know how we could have done it. I mean, nobody plans on doing this. Nobody practices this. Everything's just like given. I mean, you just go off instinct. What to do? What would you do?
Mm-hmm.
How would you do it? What would be the safest way to do it? Like, not only to catch the people, but I mean to stop it.
Right.
To stop it from happening again. So you gotta kind of watch what you say, what you let, just like they do. They won't let us know everything about every individual case. And we don't want to go out there and just blurt everything out so the suspect can get away.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's just frustrating, it's aggravating, it's still healing.
Well, you just kind of touched on something right there, talking about how you hold, the police are very limited on what they release out there. Like you said, obviously that's so that way to protect the investigation itself. I want to go back a little bit to 2016 when they finally call. I mean, I talked to your mother a little bit about that. I mean, what was the family's reaction to hearing that, they found Regina, but it was all the way back in 2000?
Initially, she was found, relief. Now we can start the process. Hearing when she was found, it was stressful. He was there the whole time talking to them. They had this information. And they're telling us no. They're telling us no, we can't release anything. Even though we had already did the DNA, what my brother did, and whoever else they wanted to take DNA from. We have viable information about a case, an ongoing case, and they're still not releasing nothing. So what can you do? I mean, there's a law. I mean, all we do is maybe get out a few questions before they tell us, we're trespassing, we're doing, or whatever. They can't release no information. Basically, a shut door. So I was very, very proud of my brother when he reached out, and no one told him what to do. He wanted his sister. He didn't care what shape, fashion, or form she was in.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted her found. He wanted, even, we thought she wanted to leave to Mexico or something, got married, anything, instead of closed doors. Kind of like, left us hanging, and we thought they were our buddies on our side, but, yeah. the hearing resulted in finding her. It was released until we heard when they found her. And it was like a letdown. I know they were doing the best they could, and I'm not blaming them. It's how I felt. How it was just
right, like you
just
said,
poor management, of information, especially with ongoing cases. I think if anybody has an ongoing case, they need to be able to get into these databases, whatever it is, and get information.
Right.
On gender, on size, on sex, on everything, hair, race, tattoo, things that will help find their loved one, and not just close the door.
That was one of the things that was kind of hard when I was doing research on her case. I mean, there's not a lot of
closed doors.
There, it's a lot of lack of information on my end. It's not knowing what she was wearing last, or not knowing, like I said, I mean, she's a 16-year-old girl. I mean, that young, on the cusp of life. She had the whole world ready at her feet, and this happens. I mean, what do you do? Like you said, none of us really know what we're going to do in that scenario. None of us know or plan when our loved ones go missing, and we can only do what we can do. But like I said, that's been the biggest challenge about doing these cases, not just Regina's case, but just all the cases that I've been researching. It's lack of information, and and if it's not lack of information, it's very slim to none. And like I said, for Regina's case, everything that I know is very limited. Granted, a lot of what made Regina's case really stand out is the fact that there's not a lot of leading up to, but more so after the fact information now. And that's been the frustration. I mean, I can only imagine how frustrating that is on your guys' end too.
We're managing. I mean, not blaming them per se. Just kind of a little distraught with the way they handled it. I mean, within that 2 weeks or whatever, the window that they found her, we were there talking with them, and I don't release nothing at all, nothing whatsoever. They just take more of your information. They'll take down what you think she's wearing this time, or it's just aggravating. It's the same thing. It's probably the same person talked to you the last time he was there, and he's asking the same question that he did before. And if he already has his information, why are you just giving us a runaround? Why don't you file that information that way you can go back to it and look at it, and then maybe come up with a better question or a different question? How come you won't tell us anything? And I understand that you're only doing your job, but that's what I'm saying. But the way they handle information, the way it's I don't know that I know a way of doing it better, but it's got to be something. They can track down all kinds of stuff. Well, now they can, but even then they could with the technology they had then. I don't know, just like, honestly, sweep it under the rug, kind of, sort of. I'm saying that's what they did, but I mean, that's kind of what it felt like. Here they are again, But yeah, here we are again. We want information.
That was one of the things that I when I talked to your mother initially about was, do you feel that, and like you said, the police at that time, they're doing their job, they're doing all the things that they can do, but I mean, do you feel as though that Regina's case was handled differently because of her race? I mean, as much as
maybe the neighborhood she lived in, or whatever. I know what you're getting at, and I don't want to think like that. But when you're there, that's what they make you feel like. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was going to say something.
Yeah, you kind of answered the question. I mean, like I said, a lot of these Indigenous cases that I research and that I look into and that we're going to go down the road and look, and learn about. A lot of them are eyebrow raising. A lot of them are very hit you on the head and like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right, or it's hard.
I wouldn't go,
sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say I wouldn't go so far as like blaming a department, an organization, or anything, because it's under that. It's under that organization. It's under that department. It's under law.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I wouldn't blame the department, but just like everywhere, people are employed. It's an outfit. It's a structure.
Mm-hmm.
And that place is you go and keep going, regardless of who works there. But those that worked there at the time, I feel that those people could have handled things a little bit differently. Not the whole department, just the people, the individuals themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it's the cops, not that it's the investigators. I don't blame any branch. Departments don't blame that. It's the individuals. It's us that walk in there and they see us. It's the individuals.
That's a really good way to really look at it.
I don't want to blame the departments or anything else, but the individuals that worked there at the time, I believe they could have handled things a little bit differently. But hell, I was 20 years old and they look at me like I'm pumped, probably just wanting to get drunk or whatever. That's just, I don't know, it's just this way. Like I said, you're a product of your environment. I mean, that's what you get seen as, no matter where you go.
I lived on a reservation my entire life, and the area that I grew up in, there was a lot of stigma, I think would be a good word to use, when it comes to the Indigenous community and the outside world. I mean, obviously there's a preconception as to who this person is because of where they're from and stuff like that. But I mean, like you said,
mm-hmm.
it's not so much one body, it's more so the individuals themselves.
Right.
I think that's a really healthy way to look at it.
Honestly, that's what it helped my little process, thinking like that, because I wanted to lash out and blame the police, but we could have walked with it too. We could, we could have done things as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it was just right there. Maybe 1,000, maybe 2 blocks, 1,000 feet or so. I don't know, maybe 2 blocks. How far she walked. So no, I was saying that's true.
You've given us a lot to really digest, and a very healthy. I mean, you obviously, like you said, you're keeping a very positive view on everything rather than cursing, the darkness. And like you said, you choose to look at it in a positive way. Now, when they found, when they tell the family that we found Regina, they go from missing to homicide. Obviously, right now, as the case stands, is an open investigation, an open homicide for the past 4 years. I mean, is there anything at all that they've talked about or that you can talk about that might have given some indication as to how it went from a missing to homicide?
No, I was thinking the same thing. I even started kind of like, I don't know, we all got the rambunctious ones, in our families that, who knows? I mean, that's I was looking for anything. I was thinking, well, what if it was someone we knew, what if it was, I don't know, everything. I feel things run through my head, and
mm-hmm.
I don't really hang on one basket. I do a quick run through and then hang it out, and then I try to find another way of thinking, and then lay there at night and then analyze each thought that I went through, and I don't know, depending on my mood, pick the best one or pick the worst one. Working all different angles here,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it's just frustrating when it's right there at the tip of your fingers, nothing you can do about it.
One of the things that that I did talk about, that I talked about with your mother, was that the whole goal of this podcast that I've set out to do was to, it started off talking about these cases and giving light and voices to people like Regina, that now are no longer able to tell their stories. And so the goal is to talk about that. And as I got further down the road, I started looking at these cases more and more and started looking at these pictures. I mean, I can read about it. I can read testimonials from family, from friends, talking about, that she was a good person or they were this kind of person, stuff like that. But I mean, it gets lost in translation that these aren't just pictures. These aren't just missing people. That they were people, that they are and were loved. They were someone's daughter, someone's mother, someone's niece, someone's cousin, and I feel like having you guys on the podcast definitely helps the people that are listening right now kind of illustrate that and kind of bring Regina back to, kind of bring that spirit back. And one of the things that I asked was if you guys would like to share some of your personal story, some stories about Regina, kind of explain to the listeners or show your favorite stories of who she was.
I kind of put those in my archives. Those are mine. But I hear you. I hear what you're saying.
And that's and that's like you said, those are things that, and we all deal with that, when it comes to loss in that way. We all hold on to these things, these memories, like you said, and it's for our comfort. And I totally get where you're coming from on that end too.
She was, I'll tell you this much, she was funny, she was goofy, she made you damn laugh. She was very comical. For her size and everything else, she's very strong. She was a little scrapper. She was a tomboy, but couldn't get away.
Once again, I want to give a great big thank you to the Curtis family for allowing me to sit down and talk with them to help share their stories and really fill in some blanks that I know you probably had and I know that I had. And hopefully in the future we get to sit down and actually talk with Regina's brother, Virgil. And I know that he's expressed excitement about being part of the show as well as other family members as well. But once again, thank you all. If you guys are listening, I want to say thank you all so much for allowing me to kind of come in and just listen to your stories. And that's going to do it for this episode of One Missing, One Murdered, All Indigenous. Again, I want to thank everybody that showed their support, checking out the YouTube page, the Facebook page, as well as downloading on Podbean. I am working on getting towards iTunes and Google Play and stuff like that, but like everything else, I'm still working out the kinks and stuff. But again, thank you to everybody. And one of the things that I wanted to let everybody know is that if you know a case or have a case or would like me to look into a case that you are interested in me knowing or would like me to cover in a future episode, hit me up on the Facebook page. You can find me at Jordan Lone Bear, as well as the Facebook page, which is One Missing, One Murdered, All Indigenous on Facebook, or as well as the YouTube page. And if you'd like to email me directly, you can email me at trueindigenouscrimepod@gmail.com. Once again, thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you guys so much for your love, your support. All music is actually done by myself. Editing as well is done by myself. Kind of the one-man show here. But again, I want to say thank you to everybody, and I hope you all have a great day, and we'll catch you down the road. Have a good one.